Hi everyone, Canoopsy here. To celebrate 10 years of iPhone design, let's take a look back at the amazing design evolution, and start at the beginning. The first iPhone, also known as the iPhone 2G or simply just the Apple iPhone, is very small compared to our really big phones today, but was huge for people back in 2007 with its 3.5-inch screen. The back has a two-tone aluminum and plastic build, and there's also a stainless steel frame going around the sides. It's one of the best feeling iPhones ever, like a smooth pebble with a really nice weight to it. The bottom plastic plate does break up the design a little bit, but that's where all the antennas and connectivity stuff is located. This phone also introduced the very signature iPhone design trait, which was the circular home button. Next is the iPhone 3G, and a year later, the 3GS. The 3G does have many similarities design-wise to the first iPhone, but the main difference being the back cover. It's now fully shiny plastic compared to aluminum on the previous generation. These days, it is incredibly hard to find a clean unit of the iPhone 3G or 3GS because the back just scratched incredibly easily, just like the future iPhone 7 and 7 Plus in jet black. The phone does look pretty nice though, and feels great in the hand as well, with an extremely curvy back cover and a nice grippy coating so it basically stays in your hand. Also, compared to the first iPhone, there was now metal buttons instead of plastic ones, a more humble speaker arrangement, and a much more normal headphone jack. Except oddly enough with now thicker front bezels. Now fast forward to the iPhone 4 and iPhone 4S, what many people even today still dub as the best looking iPhone ever made. With a pure glass front and back and a stainless steel frame, the phone looks a lot like today's phones and is highly premium feeling in the hand. Even though it was a pretty big redesign, the phone still had the exact same screen size as the previous two iPhones, except now with Apple's Retina branding. The previous iPhone 3G had a resolution of 480 by 320 at 163 pixels per inch, while the iPhone 4 got a 960 by 540 display at 326 pixels per inch. And in the camera department, the iPhone 4 got its first flash module on the back and also the first front-facing camera on an iPhone, so iPhone selfies were born. Now, if we're talking about the iPhone 4, we definitely have to talk about AntennaGate.
Large drop-in bars, and this has been since dubbed AntennaGate.
Basically, if you held the phone in a certain way, it would totally lose cellular reception instantly, and it's not really a good thing. Apple did eventually fix it in the future and also gave out bumpers to fix it, but is one of Apple's biggest iPhone failures ever. 1 year later, the iPhone 4S came out with really no external design changes, but was also the last iPhone announced before Steve Jobs passed away the next day. But things in the Apple world didn't just stop because of this tragic loss. With Tim Cook as Apple's new CEO, a year later, the iPhone 5 was officially released and marked the trend of Apple's future iPhone offerings. They finally dropped that pretty small 3.5-inch display for a marginally larger 4-inch display. This phone is what many Apple fans actually wanted, but it was still criticized for a few key things. People didn't like the new Lightning connector because they had to get new cables, but it was a huge beneficial change for the iPhone. Consumers criticized the larger screen, saying it really went against Apple's principles, but in the end, everybody loves larger screens. But despite these pretty lame criticisms, this phone's design still holds up very well today. It's a unibody metal build with top and bottom glass windows for connectivity. There's also beautiful diamond-cut chamfered edges and a whole bunch of other small tweaks that made this phone feel extremely refined. A year later, the iPhone 5S pretty much looked exactly the same, except for a few kind of small design tweaks, but were incredibly large. First is the Touch ID home button. It wasn't the first fingerprint scanner on a phone, but it was the most secure, the fastest, and probably the best. At first, it was pretty much called a gimmick, but really set the precedent for security on iPhones and other phones in general. And a bit less notable, but Apple actually added a second LED module to the phone for better low-light pictures, as well as the new space gray color, which has seen a huge evolution over the last few years, because Apple doesn't really know what space gray looks like, I guess. Later on, Apple released the iPhone SE, which was basically the same look as the iPhone 5S, except with now iPhone 6S internals. Alongside the iPhone 5S, Apple also released the iPhone 5C, which is basically the exact same phone as the iPhone 5, except with now a polycarbonate colorful shell. I made a video about why this phone basically flopped, but pretty much because it was priced way too high, especially compared to the iPhone 5S. The phone definitely doesn't feel as premium as the iPhone 5S or iPhone 5, but still has a really nice overall charm to it. It feels fun, playful, the nice colors look great on these phones, and the phones do still feel good in the hand. Then in 2014, things changed again. Apple released the iPhone 6, 6 Plus, and in the future, a year later, the 6S and 6S Plus. This was a huge iPhone design change, and came at a time when phones were getting bigger and bigger, and Apple's phones were just very small, so this combated those phones perfectly. The iPhone 6 got a 4.7-inch screen, and the iPhone 6 Plus got a 5.5-inch screen. This is also Apple's thinnest iPhone as well, and it's not really all positivity. Because of the very thin size and the huge body of the iPhone 6 Plus, it pretty much started bending in people's pockets. And Bendgate had to be the absolute biggest of pretty much all iPhone fails ever, but the phones still sold a lot. Despite being a very different overall iPhone experience, it does have some similarities to the very first iPhone. It has a rounded design, so it's both kind of slippery and more comfortable to hold, as well as a polished Apple logo. The phone was definitely beautiful, but it also had those really ugly antenna lines in the back and the first protruding camera on an iPhone as well. And for the iPhone 6S and 6S Plus a year later, Apple used pretty much the exact same design, except now with a new rose gold color, which was incredibly pink, as well as 3D touch beneath the display. In 2016, we saw the iPhone 7 and 7 Plus, still pretty much the same aesthetically to the iPhone 6, except now with no headphone jack. This iPhone also came in just a straight up matte black color, which I personally really appreciate, and a very glossy jet black color that looked just like the iPhone 3G and 3GS. Apple also toned down the antenna lines, blended the camera housing more into the body, and the 7 Plus actually came with Apple's first dual camera system, which has really changed the entire industry for smartphone cameras. Apple also added a new dual stereo speaker setup and ditched the original pressable home button in favor of a virtual one with haptic feedback. And today, I actually much prefer the new home button. It feels much more futuristic, much more precise, and just it's way better overall. Now 2017 was a pretty odd year for iPhones. The iPhone 8, 8 Plus, and iPhone 10 were all released in the exact same year. The iPhone 8 and 8 Plus have been pretty meh iPhones overall, and also broke the whole Apple naming system because where did 7S go? Where's 9 gonna go? It's a disaster. They look pretty much the exact same as the iPhone 7 and 7 Plus, except now with a new glass back and a new kind of pale gold color. The internals are definitely a really big deal, but the same overall external design made customers really just look past this phone and forget about it. But also because the future was basically staring them right in the face. The iPhone 10. It's a lot like the first iPhone because pretty much everything changes again. The iPhone 10 takes aspects from many of the past iPhones in one way or another and culminates them into one seriously beautiful iPhone. The phone definitely differs though by ditching the very iconic Apple home button, as well as the monstrously thick bezels and flipping the camera arrangement vertically. The phone also packs a very high resolution 5.8-inch OLED screen and has the now signature notch up top for facial recognition. While the notch may be a bit unsightly, this is what gives personality to the iPhone 10. Basically for years and years and years, the iPhone's defining trait was the home button. That's how you sort of knew it was an iPhone. And the notch is that new defining trait, telling you it's an iPhone and not a different phone. It of course exists for the technology beneath the glass, but above all things, it's also a design trait. And whether you love it or hate it, this is the future of iPhone design. I'm a big fan of technology design as a whole, so to see the most iconic phone brand evolve year after year after year based on consumer wants, technology trends, and new technology that comes available is just incredibly interesting to me personally. So, what was your favorite iPhone? Let me know in the comments down below. Like this video, subscribe, and thank you for watching.